That's right about your father's inheritance. Emily and I will take over all the remaining assets. My mother told me right after my father's funeral. To be honest, I had no intention of discussing the inheritance on the day my father passed away. However, Emily eagerly pushed the conversation forward with sparkling eyes. There's a will too. Look, Emily continued, proudly displaying the document. Just after Dad went to the hospital, Mom and I visited his room and had him write this. Dad immediately agreed to leave neither inheritance nor anything to you, sis. Dad did that? I asked, stunned. Yeah, he did, even though he always relied on you. I know it's harsh. It's pitiful for you, isn't it? But of course, Dad always found me more affable and favored me, Emily said smugly. No way, I started, but my mother cut in gleefully. You who have no job, we have no intention of giving you a single penny from the inheritance. We'll be enjoying a trip abroad, so prepare to leave this house by the time we return. Wait, how can I accept this? Why would such a thing happen? I tried to speak, but Mom and Emily retorted coldly. Be quiet. It's impossible for you to get anything from us now. Now that Dad's gone, we can finally act freely. Your role here is done, so leave immediately. All the sacrifices I'd made for Dad, all I'd done for him, and this was the result. How cruel. Giving everything for such an ungrateful father was pointless, even if I wished for their help. Now it's too late. Hearing those words, any remaining familial feelings toward my mother and Emily disappeared entirely. I couldn't accept what they said about my father, whom I deeply respected. Without expressing all I wanted to say to my mother and Emily, I calmly responded, I understand. I can't stay with you two any longer. I'll gladly leave. With that, I left my childhood home. My name is Ashley. I have a sister, Emily, who's 4 years younger than me. We're a family of 4 with our 2 parents. Emily's personality is similar to our mother's. She's affable but sometimes lazy. She often teases my father and me, who have more sincere personalities. Our mother, having a temperament like Emily's, felt especially fond of her. When we were children, it was evident she favored Emily over me. Whenever she met her friends, my mother would only take Emily with her, often leaving me at home. According to her, it's embarrassing to show plain and quiet Ashley to my friends. On the other hand, my mother was very proud of Emily, who was friendly and loved by everyone. Even with such a mother and sister, the reason I could live my days positively was because of my father. He valued my sincerity and loved Emily equally. I deeply appreciated and loved my father's fair attitude. Even after becoming an adult, the way my mother treated me remained unchanged. However, thanks to my father's presence, our household remained stable. But after my father retired at 65, an incident occurred at home. He tripped over a small step in the house and broke a bone. Although he tried hard with surgery and rehabilitation, his aging muscles didn't recover easily. As he spent more time bedridden and needed care, the dynamics at home changed. My mother and Emily became even colder toward him. Hey Mom, what do you think about this inn? Emily asked. Yeah, it looks good. The food seems delicious too. Maybe we should go with this one. My mother replied, looking at a guidebook. They chatted excitedly. What are you talking about? I asked. We're planning for a family trip, my mother answered with a hint of annoyance. But considering Dad's difficulty in moving around, isn't traveling difficult for him? I responded. Emily smiled and said, well, we're not thinking of bringing him in the first place. We plan to leave him at home. That's cruel. It would be hard for him if he's left alone. If Dad's not joining, I will stay home with him, I said. My mother and Emily just smiled at each other. Then my mother said, that's fine too. If that's the case, Emily and I will just go by ourselves. Whether you two come or not is up to you, but since it's a family trip, we'll be using money from Dad's bank account. A quick glance at the guidebook revealed they had chosen a room meant for just 2 people. It was clear they had never intended to bring either my father or me along. After that, my mother and Emily frequently went out by themselves, staying at high-quality inns and dining at reputed restaurants. It was as if neither my father nor I existed in the house. I kept an eye on their actions from a distance, trying to finish my work as quickly as possible to take care of my father. When I couldn't handle everything alone, I sought help from care services for tasks like bathing assistance or accompanying my father on short walks around the neighborhood. On days when I had to work overtime, I asked my mother and Emily to look after my father, but they avoided the responsibility. Ashley, I came to help with the bath. But is there no one at home today? Upon receiving this notification from the care service staff, I quickly called my mother and Emily. Despite having informed them of the staff's visit in advance, they had left my father alone and gone out. When they finally returned home, I confronted them, but there was no apology. The staff are professionals, right? It's okay even if we aren't there. Dad is an adult. He'll be fine being left alone. We don't want our time taken up caring for him like you do, they said, genuinely believing they were doing nothing wrong. I realized I couldn't rely on them and decided that taking care of my father was my responsibility. I juggled work and caregiving. The daily grind was far from easy, especially since neither my mother nor Emily showed any concern or understanding. My father's condition worsened as the days went by. He spent more time seated than walking and ate much less. As the 9th year of caring for my father approached, I became increasingly concerned about how frail he looked when I took him to the hospital. I was hit with a shocking diagnosis. Your father has advanced cancer. It can't be, I thought, realizing that we might not have much time left with him. Determined to support him in his final days, I quit my job to care for him full-time. I knew I had to tell my mother and Emily. The reactions were unexpected. When I informed them about his condition, my mother commented, "Really? He never drank or smoked. It's unfortunate that such a sincere person ended up with cancer." Emily, with a stunned expression, said, "I can't believe you'd give up your job to take care of Dad. I'd never make that choice." I thought they would be concerned about him, but they showed no signs of it at all. I was honestly surprised by their indifference, as if it was someone else's business. In the end, the two of them only visited him at the hospital for a short time and never really came to pay a proper visit. I supported him daily during his chemotherapy treatments. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't stop the cancer's progression, and half a year later, he passed away. The days after the diagnosis went by in a blur. Upon hearing of his death, my mother and Emily started a private discussion and left me to arrange the funeral on my own. They disappeared somewhere, leaving me with no time to mourn my father, as I had to handle the funeral arrangements alone. As the funeral began, my mother appeared and began to deliver the chief mourner's speech. Despite having done nothing, she put on a face for the public. I was irritated by her behavior, but the funeral proceeded smoothly. Worn out as I headed home, I was invited to the living room by my mother and Emily, who had already returned, saying they had something to discuss. Without any consideration for my exhaustion, my mother abruptly declared, "Regarding your father's inheritance, Emily and I will inherit this house and all other assets." Frankly, I wasn't in the mood to discuss inheritance on the very day my father passed away. However, Emily eagerly chimed in, "We even have a proper will. Look," she proudly presented a document and began to explain. "Right after Dad was admitted to the hospital, Mom and I visited him and had him sign this. It states that you won't inherit anything." Dad agreed to it immediately. "Dad did?" I asked in disbelief. With a smirk, Emily said, "After all the help you provided, it's so cold, right? Maybe Dad in the end preferred me over his too serious elder daughter." "That's impossible," I began, but my mother interrupted with an inappropriate grin. "Clearly Emily is more adorable. Though your father always stayed home and had no hobbies, he surely saved a lot. Mom even quit her job because of the inheritance, and I took some time off work to enjoy it for a while," Emily added. Before I could respond, the two of them continued their conversation. My mother then told me, "You, who have no job, won't get a penny from the inheritance. We plan to enjoy a vacation abroad for a while, so you should leave this place by then," my mother declared. I hurriedly countered, "Wait a minute, do you genuinely believe what you're doing is right? If that's the case..." Without waiting for me to finish, both my mother and Emily firmly responded, "Shut your mouth. It's a waste of time trying to take the inheritance from us. With your father gone, we'll do as we please. Your role here is done. Please leave this house promptly." To think that after all I sacrificed for Dad, this is what I get. There was no need to go to such lengths for such an inept father. It's pointless to regret and think about it now. Hearing those words, any remaining bond I felt for my mother and Emily was completely severed. I couldn't forgive them for speaking that way about my beloved father. Holding back what I wanted to say, I calmly told them, "I understand your thoughts. From now on, I can't imagine living together with you two. I'll gladly leave." Despite their initial surprise at my acceptance, the two soon smiled smugly together. "Good to know. Once you leave this house, never rely on us again." Our relationship ends here. Whatever happens to you, we want no part in it. Don't even think of contacting us." Receiving this intense sentiment from my mother, I packed only my essentials and left the house. A few days after the inheritance discussion, something unexpected happened. I received a call from my mother. My mother, who had claimed she would cut off contact with me, was suddenly on the phone, confronting me angrily. "What have you done? Where has all the money from your father's account gone? Why are you suddenly calling? Didn't you say you wouldn't contact me?" "Silence. This is an emergency. Return your father's savings immediately." "What are you talking about? I left the passbook at the old house. I have no way of accessing it after I left. But the money in the account is definitely gone. Such a significant amount of his savings couldn't have disappeared so suddenly. I found it suspicious when you managed to move out so quickly without a job," she snapped, assuming I had squandered my father's money. "Mom, haven't you ever checked the account balance before?" "Huh? I haven't bothered with such things." "I see. If you had, you would have noticed that Dad's savings weren't that much to begin with." "What do you mean? His savings were? Where did his retirement money go?" "We used it for our wedding ceremony and the new house." "Wedding? New house? I have no idea what you're talking about." I had been in a romantic relationship with a man named Sean, who was in charge of the caregiving service for my father. Our relationship started through our mutual care for my father. I had told my father about my relationship with Sean soon after we began dating. Sean proposed, but at that time, I was overwhelmed with caregiving and work responsibilities and couldn't make a decision. Upon learning the truth, my father had said, "Care for yourself more than me. I want you to have a happy marriage," my father had said, cheering me on despite my hesitations. He even started helping with the wedding venue selection and looking for a new place to live. We had reserved a wedding date for the following year and even signed a contract for a new apartment that my father liked. This all happened 6 months before we found out that he had terminal cancer. As a gesture of gratitude, my father covered most of the costs for the wedding and the new apartment. That was the reason for the decrease in the account balance. Hearing the turn of events, my mother's voice trembled. She was clearly shaken. So there wasn't any inheritance for us to inherit in the first place. Primarily just the family home, but given its location, we shouldn't expect a high selling price, I replied. Emily, having overheard the conversation, snatched the phone from my mother in panic. "Wait, so the financial assistance for your wedding is much more than the inheritance for Mom and me?" "That seems to be the case. Dad knew about my marriage and me leaving the house, so maybe he didn't see a problem in leaving the family home to both of you. He might have used a significant amount for me and intended the inheritance to compensate for that. Could it be that the reason you quit your job was because your marriage had been decided upon?" Emily asked. "That's right. Sean is also involved in investment activities and is financially stable. He wanted me to become a full-time housewife. Also, I thought if I resigned early, I could focus on taking care of our father." "I can't believe it. Why did you keep the news about your marriage and the savings a secret from us?" Taking a deep breath, I answered, "I thought about telling you several times, but every time, neither of you showed any interest and avoided the topic. Why didn't you stop me from taking a break from work or Mom from quitting her part-time job?" "How are we supposed to live now? I wanted to talk to you after the funeral. Wasn't it you and Mom who shut me down, saying you can't expect anything from us? But I thought family members should help each other out. Family. When I was swamped with work and caregiving, you were out having fun, neglecting Dad. How can I think of someone who said such mean things as family? Don't just say whatever is convenient for you." Shocked and lost for words, Emily was taken aback. Afterward, my mother pleaded with me, "Ashley, the truth is, I've already paid for the trip. I also made various purchases expecting the inheritance, so now I have no savings left. So what about it? I've already quit my part-time job, right? If we don't get any inheritance money, we won't have any money for next month. So until I find a new job, I hope you can lend us some. When you kicked me out of the family home, didn't you say you'd never come to me again? That our relationship was over? That you wouldn't interfere with whatever happens to me in the future? About that, neither of you ever helped when Dad and I were going through tough times. Now, when you're in trouble, you want to rely on me. That's incredibly brazen. But if you don't help us now, what will we do?" Without waiting for my mother to finish, I ended the call and blocked their numbers. I was utterly disgusted by my mother and sister, who only claim to be family when they're in trouble. I decided to distance myself from these two. Later on, I heard from various people that although my mother and Emily had canceled their trip, since it was a last-minute cancellation, they couldn't get a refund. They'd been barely scraping by, asking friends and relatives for money. They had to sell their house, but as I expected, they didn't get as much as they hoped with the initial expenses for a new place. With hardly any money left after selling their house and covering moving costs, Emily returned to work. However, because she had asked her colleagues for money, her relationships at work became strained. She had planned to leave her job soon after finding a good partner. But because of the situation, that partner, as well as other men, distanced themselves. Her friends, too, kept their distance. My mother tried to find another part-time job, but her previous workplace had already hired someone else. Due to her age, her job opportunities were limited. She's been working diligently, facing complaints from younger colleagues. Currently, they manage their living expenses with my mother's meager part-time salary and Emily's earnings, slowly repaying their debts. Both of them seem worn out. As for me, I was able to have a small wedding at the venue my father chose. The only regret is that my father couldn't be there for my wedding, but I believe he's watching over our happy moments from somewhere. My married life with Sean has been smoother than expected. We're enjoying peaceful and fulfilling days together. I'm eternally grateful to my father for supporting my relationship with Sean and giving me this opportunity to build a peaceful life with my husband, always remembering my gratitude to my father.
My name is Cecil. The other day, my daughter surprised me by asking if I could teach her how to do makeup. She's still in elementary school, but it seems like girls these days grow up so fast. When I was her age, I was excited about getting cheap candies that came with toy necklaces or lipsticks from vending machines. It feels like just yesterday I was changing her diapers, and now she's becoming a young lady. It almost brings tears to my eyes. Today, I want to reminisce about a time when I was more into beauty. It was about 8 years ago. I had just finished staying at my parents' house for a month to prepare for giving birth and return home to my husband Tommy with our baby. I thought we were starting our happy life as a family of 3, but it turned out to be a family of 4. My mother-in-law, Melinda, who was supposed to be at her own house, was unexpectedly there to greet me. I thought my son might struggle on his own, so I moved in to help out. Maybe men have a hard time with daily tasks when they're alone. I thanked Melinda for taking care of my husband, and she seemed pleased. When I entered the house, everything was tidy and the air was fresh. It seemed like having Melinda around was a good idea, but then a problem came up. My wedding ring, which I had to take off during pregnancy, was missing from the bedroom drawer where it should have been. I searched everywhere but couldn't find it. What was even weirder was that my special bag and shoes were also gone. These were items I hardly ever used and kept stored away. Feeling uneasy, I asked Melinda if she had tidied up the bedroom closet. She said she hadn't touched it. If Melinda didn't tidy up, then someone must have taken my things. I asked her if she noticed anything unusual while I was away. I asked both my husband and Melinda if they knew anything about the missing items, but they avoided making eye contact and denied that anything was wrong. They insisted that everything was normal. I tried to explain to them that my wedding ring, brand name bag, and shoes were missing, and it seemed like my bedroom had been burglarized. Melinda seemed surprised and asked if I was sure I had searched everywhere. In a panic, I nodded at her while calling the police on my mobile phone. When Melinda questioned why I was calling the police, I froze, caught off guard by her reaction. The police on the phone asked for details, and I struggled to provide them while feeling Melinda's disapproving gaze. In less than 10 minutes, 2 police officers arrived at our home. Despite Melinda's insistence that it was all a misunderstanding, the officers wanted to see the room where the theft occurred. It was unsettling to realize that both Melinda and I were supposed to be victims in this situation. The idea of strangers entering our home made me feel faint, while Melinda was red-faced with anger, insisting that we didn't need the police. Even my husband tried to calm me down, saying it was just a couple of rings and everything would be fine. Just a ring or 2? I snapped back. Those are our cherished rings that we bought together. They're irreplaceable. The police officer watched me closely and then asked me to show him the room where the incident occurred. He suggested that my husband and mother-in-law stay in the living room while we talked. As we walked to the bedroom, Melinda continued to protest angrily, saying it wasn't right to snoop around someone's home. But I couldn't help but think that if the house was in my husband's name, it was also my home. The older officer seemed puzzled by their behavior and asked if I had been living with my mother-in-law all this time. I explained that I had returned from my parents' home just today and discovered that Melinda had been living here while I was away. When asked if my husband had discussed letting his mother stay, I said I never agreed to it. Before I left for my parents' house, the missing items were indeed here. I didn't have proof for the ring and bag, but I did have a photo of the shoes. I was considering selling them secondhand. See, the save date on the data is exactly a month ago, right? The police officer said, narrowing his eyes as if he was starting to piece something together. Let's take a look at the room, he suggested. I led the officer to the bedroom and explained again where the missing items had been stored while he collected fingerprints. As he was doing so, he noticed a handkerchief on the shelf that was unfamiliar to me. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to it. I examined it closely and realized it wasn't mine or my husband's. I explained that the shelf was where we kept our favorite photos and paintings, and my husband knew I always kept it tidy. I had never seen that handkerchief there before. Feeling uneasy, I apologized for not noticing it earlier. It seemed strange that valuable items had gone missing while unfamiliar ones were appearing. The officer asked for permission to investigate further, and I agreed. To my surprise, he found a small camera hidden inside the handkerchief. For what? Espionage? I wondered aloud. The officer remained calm amidst my confusion and checked other drawers, different from where the missing items were stored. Eventually, he found a cable in a drawer near my husband's side of the bed. The cable fit the small camera he had found earlier, the officer remarked with a wry smile. The mother's behavior is a bit suspicious, but the husband seems fishy too. I struggled to understand the situation and asked, "What do you mean? Your husband might have installed this camera." The officer explained that they found a cable for playback and wanted to check the video. "Can I use that computer?" he asked, pointing to my husband's laptop. Confused but hopeful to uncover the truth, I agreed. The officer connected the camera to the laptop effortlessly, and the laptop recognized it, opening up the menu. He selected a command and chose a random file from a folder. To our shock, the video displayed our bedroom. I went with the officer to the living room where my husband and Melinda were waiting. Melinda immediately complained, but we had to undergo questioning, feeling like criminals. My husband was also in a foul mood, dismissing it as a fuss over nothing. "Enough. Whose fault is this?" I exclaimed in anger, slamming my hand on the living room table. "I'm still recovering from giving birth, and they made me run around and panic like this. How dare you act so brazenly after what you've done? I know everything now. Look at this," I said, taking the laptop from the officer and playing the video we had just seen. My husband and Melinda gasped as they watched themselves on screen, rummaging through the bedroom shelves, taking my ring and bag, and leaving. In the video, my husband was telling Melinda about selling the stolen items. "We can both have some fun," Melinda laughed, surprising me with her carefree attitude. "Who would have thought she had such sellable items?" she remarked. "It's hard to prosecute family living together for theft," she added, seemingly unfazed. "Mom, you're amazing, so knowledgeable, so shameless," my daughter chimed in. Despite their misdeeds being pointed out, they showed no signs of guilt. Instead, the conversation suggested they were proud of their cunning. I couldn't believe that the culprits were inside the house all along. My agitation and anger grew, while my husband looked scared. Melinda still denied any wrongdoing, despite being clearly seen in the video. "Okay, since you insist, let's watch this," I said, playing a different video. "Oh, come on. What about your wife?" Melinda exclaimed, trying to deflect attention. The video showed Melinda intimately engaged with a much younger man on a bed. She seemed unconcerned about her husband, referring to him as Rocky and expressing happiness about their affair. "Don't worry, I'll give you some money," she assured the younger man, wrapping her arms around his neck. It was as if she was trying to absorb his youthfulness. Though I hadn't seen it before, it resembled something straight out of a club scene. "Thank you, Melinda. I love you, you're so sweet," I said sarcastically as we watched the video. Melinda's alluring voice and actions on screen made even my husband look away, unable to bear it. The young officer seemed queasy, on the verge of saying, "Ew," while the older officer quietly scolded him. "Hey, stop it. Don't show such nonsense," Melinda yelled, her face turning bright red. My husband, perhaps feeling it wasn't his concern, seemed about to laugh at Melinda losing her composure. "Really, Tommy? You think it's funny, huh?" I challenged him, playing another video. As the videos played on, revealing my husband's affairs, the young police officer burst into uncontrollable laughter while the older one scolded him again. In one video, Ashley was stroking my husband's head, asking how many other women he was seeing. My husband responded with practiced lines, claiming she was the only one. The pattern repeated with the other women, each time promising gifts in exchange for secrecy. It was clear my husband had been leading a double life, lavishing gifts on these women. You might have noticed he's making a huge loss buying brand name items for each encounter, I remarked bitterly. The only video showing Melinda's actions was that one, suggesting the recording button was accidentally left on, capturing the moment. Melinda not only stole my things, but also got caught in her own actions. Rest assured, it's not some peculiar hobby to watch Melinda's actions, or maybe it is. Melinda and my husband, embarrassed and exposed even to the police, were pale and slumped in defeat. But it wasn't over yet. Just as I thought this, the intercom rang. "They're here," I said. Melinda looked at me with a tired face, but I ignored her gaze and went to the entrance to welcome Bruce. When Melinda saw Bruce, she lost her words and screamed, "Seems like you were cheating in your son's house, huh?" I told him. No, it's not like that," my husband protested. "What do you mean it's not?" Bruce asked. "Cecil, could you play the video?" "With pleasure," I said, casting a cold glance at the bewildered Melinda. Bruce burst into loud laughter as he watched her flirtatious video. "An old woman like this seducing a young man for money, aren't you ashamed?" he joked. Melinda blushed furiously, her previously defiant attitude gone. "That was funny. Let's see my son's too. Let's see how much he's grown," Bruce said, laughing while focusing on a particular part of my husband in the video. After watching all the infidelity videos, Bruce commented with a straight face, "Both mother and son letting young people take their money. Beyond disappointing, it's pitiful." Needless to say, Melinda and my husband would have preferred being laughed at. What we learned from my questioning was that Melinda accidentally found out about my husband's affairs. She kept it secret in exchange for using our house to meet her own lover. For Melinda, it was embarrassing to be seen with a much younger man, and her lover, lacking money and having a wife, couldn't easily find places to meet. For my husband, having the freedom to invite girls he met online without going out was cheaper and much more convenient. Thus, Melinda and my husband, keeping each other's affairs secret, turned this house into their paradise of indulgence, becoming accomplices. Their arrangement worked by one leaving the house while the other met their lover. Melinda never imagined the videos would be accidentally recorded. "I'm sorry, Cecile." "Bruce, I'll return the money. Do anything, please forgive me," Melinda and my husband begged, bowing their heads. Bruce and I exchanged glances and laughed. "You'll do anything, right?" "Indeed, anything," we both said. Of course, they answered. "Then let's divorce," we declared simultaneously, leaving my husband and Melinda in shock. "You said you'd do anything, right?" "Let's get a divorce," I insisted. "No, wait. Anything but that, please," Melinda pleaded desperately, but Bruce refused without hesitation. The divorce was not retracted. My husband, too, was crying and deeply apologizing, but I did not withdraw the divorce either. Thus, only hours after returning from my parents' home post-childbirth, my divorce was decided upon under police supervision. Later, I had my husband pay me the same amount as the sold items as compensation in the divorce trial. Additionally, I demanded double the standard amount for alimony and compensation for infidelity. When asked why double, I slightly intimidated them by implying that their mistresses might be married, and I could inform their spouses. This was mainly a bluff, as I didn't even know their names at the time. The threat seemed effective immediately, given the number of mistresses involved. My husband, terrified of the thought of being sued by each spouse, agreed to pay double the standard amount. Meanwhile, Bruce furiously obtained the lover's contact details from a crying Melinda and called him over. He informed the lover and his wife of the affair, leading to their divorce too. Both spouses demanded compensation from their cheating partners in the divorce trials. Though I promised not to inform the mistress's spouses, I never said I wouldn't demand compensation from the mistresses themselves. After extracting all the communication from my husband's smartphone, I contacted each woman to claim compensation for the affair, which they agreed to pay secretly. I was glad my husband had so many mistresses. It turned out to be quite profitable. But as a single mother without a steady job, I knew I could never have too much money. Turning the harm I suffered into financial compensation didn't erase the damage done. So with a substantial sum of money, I divorced my husband. 8 years have passed since then. Eventually, my husband ended up paying compensation to his mistress's spouses too. Their husbands, noticing their wives suddenly had a lot of money, grew suspicious. This led to the discovery of the affairs, resulting in some divorces. My husband, now overwhelmed with debt from the numerous compensations, was offered help by a certain woman, whom he thought was a goddess descended. However, she turned out to be a bad influence. He thought they were close to marriage, only to find out later she was already engaged to another man. My husband had spent what little money he had on a ring and dates for her, only to end up with a big loss and a broken heart. He never learns. Of course, I can't muster any sympathy for him, I thought to myself. Melinda, having proposed marriage to her affair partner after her divorce, was spectacularly rejected. Still, she didn't give up, repeatedly ambushing him on his commute until she was cautioned under a public nuisance ordinance. Naturally, that was the end of her relationship with her lover, who, as Bruce said, had only seen her as a wallet from the start. Well, everyone should be able to see it. Melinda was the only one who hadn't realized she was being used. It's a laughable tale. As for Bruce, after separating from Melinda and becoming estranged from his son, I worried about him being alone. But it seems the compensation money from the divorce trial sparked an interest in bonsai. Now, he's happily involved in a circle with people who share his hobby. That's a relief, though I didn't expect it. I looked him up, and sure enough, he'd even set up an SNS account. I've discreetly followed you, father-in-law, and me, honestly fed up with men. Marriage, no more, and still going strong. As a single mother, I relied on my parents until my child was old enough for daycare, then started job hunting, juggling child rearing. It took about a year, but I found a great company that's understanding of single mothers. There are others like me there, so although we sometimes work late, we're usually allowed to leave on time. I used to think single mothers had to work non-stop, but with proper allowances and just my daughter to care for, we live quite normally without extravagant luxuries. There's talk of a promotion when my child reaches middle school. I haven't decided yet, but I want to consider what will make my daughter happiest and my parents too. Despite everything, the joy comes from meals shared with my daughter and sometimes my parents. Oh, it did well to leave that man. Serves him right. He never even got to be called dad by my adorable daughter. My marriage ended in a crazy way, but as a parent, I still hope my daughter finds a good person and has a happy marriage. Until the day she brings home a wonderful man, I'll do my best as a mother. So off to work again today. Guess what? I sold my house, my brother-in-law Kevin said. My husband and I were really surprised, and we didn't know what to say. But the most surprised person was my mother-in-law. She looked really upset and asked, "Why? Weren't you supposed to come get me?" Kevin tried to calm her down and started to explain. "I'm Sandra. I work from home with my husband Robert. We love our peaceful workplace where we can take breaks whenever we need," I explained. Then my mother-in-law moved in with us. We were doing fine financially, so we didn't mind. "But why don't you both go out to work?" My mother-in-law would look at us with disapproval as she asked this. It made me feel tired, like we were going through the same thing all over again. The first time she questioned us like this, we explained that we were working from home. "But are you actually working?" "I've told Robert the same thing. Are you paying attention? When will you two get serious about work? Aren't you thinking about your future?" My mother-in-law couldn't understand our job. "Oh, I'm so worried. I wonder if I made a mistake coming to this house. Maybe I should have gone to Kevin's house." She would often sigh and say this. The Kevin she mentioned is Robert's brother. He married a wealthy woman named Carol, and it seems like he's living off her money now. My mother-in-law didn't know about this. Kevin asked us not to tell her. My goodness, Kevin's house isn't small like ours. It's huge, like a castle from another country. Well, I'm thinking of moving to Kevin's house eventually, which will be my new home. My mother-in-law would often say, hoping Kevin would come to take her there. But we knew deep down that Kevin and his wife would never come to get her. You see, Robert once suggested to his brother that their mother could live with him. But Kevin didn't want to live with her. So we ended up living together even though we were criticized for working remotely and called unemployed. We just accepted that's how she is. But then something happened that made it impossible for us to keep putting up with it. Out of nowhere, we got a call from Kevin. He's coming over this weekend, he said abruptly, then hung up before we could say anything. What do we do now? That guy hasn't changed at all. Robert and I were puzzled. And hearing our talk, my mother-in-law leaned in, looking excited. He's coming to take me. Please help me get ready to move, she said, pulling Robert towards her room. Mom, Kevin isn't coming to take you. He probably called for some other reason, Robert said, worried. But he didn't mention anything about picking you up when he called, did he? I added. I'm so tired of this house. You probably want to turn me into a housekeeper, but that's not happening, my mother-in-law replied with a scoff. We couldn't understand why she was thinking like that. Since she came to stay with us, she pretty much did whatever she pleased, didn't help with any chores, and relied on the money we gave her. Well, we weren't going to force her to stay, so we packed her bags as she asked and waited for Kevin to arrive. During the weekend, my brother-in-law and his wife showed up at our place. As soon as they walked in, they had these suspiciously friendly expressions on their faces. I had a bad feeling about it. Just then, my mother-in-law came out, looking excited. You're finally here. Let me tell you, Sandra is not good at doing housework at all. So I have to do them, and Robert completely ignores me. Isn't that terrible? She said, acting like she was the victim. Then brushed past Robert and welcomed her brother into our home. You guys don't mistreat Mom. There's no way we're doing that. We're giving her an allowance, and she's eating whatever she likes. Plus, Sandra is handling the house chores, Robert said, looking conflicted, but his brother seemed suspicious. Robert has always been a bit clueless, probably treating Mom badly without even realizing. And it seems Sandra isn't the considerate type. That's right. Kevin really understands me, she said. Hearing this conversation, Robert and I couldn't help but frown. Despite this, we decided to entertain our guests and led the couple to the living room. We all sat around the living room table, with Robert and me on one side and the couple on the other. Now, why are you just sitting there? Serve the tea, my mother-in-law demanded. Huh. I thought you were going to make the tea, mother-in-law. What's this about making an old woman work? See, Kevin, Sandra is like this, she said, even pretending to cry. I was so stunned by her behavior that I couldn't even respond. Once I served the tea, the mood became serious. The truth is, we sold our house. Robert and I were surprised and shocked by Kevin's words, but the one who was most shocked was my mother-in-law. Why? Why would you do something like that? Didn't you come to pick me up? She asked, flustered, confronting Kevin. He tried to calm her down, saying, take it easy, and then began to explain. We've been in debt, and even though we could pay it off by selling the house, we're broke and have nowhere to live, so we came here to see if we could stay. What debt? I tried to start a business, but it didn't work out. These things happen, you know, Kevin said with a laugh. Robert and I sighed in frustration. We only need to stay until we find a new house. Please, we have no one else to turn to, the couple pleaded, bowing their heads together. I think our expressions must have been mixed, but if they had nowhere else to go, we felt obliged to help. We agreed to let them stay temporarily in our house. However, we made it clear that they had to find their own place within a month. Okay, Kevin said, still laughing, and went to prepare for their move. After they left, my mother-in-law sat quietly, looking lost in thought. Robert and I assumed she was still processing everything. The next day, the couple's belongings arrived promptly. This much. Where are we going to put it all? This is going to be tricky. We might have to sell some things or rent a storage unit, my mother-in-law said as we discussed what to do with Kevin's belongings. Then, out of nowhere, she dropped a bombshell on us. I've been thinking, wouldn't we be more secure in the future if Kevin stays here, so you freeloaders can leave, can't you? My mother-in-law's sudden statement left my husband and me shocked. If you insist, I can tolerate Robert staying, but I don't need a wife who can't do anything. Get a divorce then. Sandra's space can be used for all these packages, my mother-in-law eagerly demanded, looking at my husband for approval. What are you talking about? He reacted, as he usually did, completely surprised. Then my brother-in-law and his wife arrived. My mother-in-law greeted them happily, but I was still shaken by her earlier words. My husband decided to ignore the situation for the moment and asked his brother to deal with the packages. There were more than I expected. Try to reduce the number, rent a storage unit, or sell some if necessary, my husband said. His brother glared at him and said, What are you talking about? These packages are important. How could I sell them? And what if they get stolen from a locker? What if they get damaged? Are you going to take responsibility, bro? My husband shook his head at his brother's selfish behavior. This is our house, you know. It's only fair that you endure some inconvenience, right? If you don't like it, find a place to live quickly and leave. But then my mother-in-law shouted, "What are you talking about? Didn't I just say if you two are not happy with Kevin and the rest, you can leave? You're basically freeloaders. You're not needed in this house. Kevin is trying to start a business and all you two do is loaf around the house, doing so-called remote work. You're a nuisance." It was like my mother-in-law was acting as if it were her own house. My husband and I exchanged looks in disbelief. My brother-in-law and his wife were surprised at my mother-in-law's words, but then they started to smirk. "That might not be a bad idea, Mom. It sounds good. It's a hassle to find a new place, so we could stay here. So why don't you sell this house to us, Carol?" My brother-in-law said, "I feel uneasy with you two around, so it would be better if you sold this place to us. And it seems like our mother-in-law agrees with us, so sell this place to us." My husband and I were stunned by their words. "What nonsense are you?" my husband started, but was cut off by my mother-in-law, who smirked. "See, both Kevin and Carol are saying the same thing. So what will you do, Robert? If you're going to divorce, you can stay here." My mother-in-law glared at me triumphantly. I prepared myself to respond, but my husband spoke up first. "Why you get to say whatever you want? Why should Sandra have to leave?" My husband was visibly angry, his voice raised. "Don't raise your voice like that. It's better without a burden around, right?" My mother-in-law retorted. But my husband responded with frustration, "You don't understand anything. This is Sandra's house." At my husband's words, my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and his wife gasped. My husband continued, adding to the tension. "This is the house that Sandra bought for our life together." What are you saying?" "There's no rule saying only the husband can buy the house. Besides, Sandra covers all of Mom's allowance and living expenses. Sandra said she'd take on that responsibility because your pension is minimal, and it would be hard for you to have financial freedom with just that." Robert glared intensely at his mother. Despite this, my mother-in-law seemed incredulous, looking at me and snickering in disbelief. "Unbelievable. Sandra just sits on the computer all day. She doesn't even do housework properly. Wasn't my allowance coming out of my pension? Otherwise, there's no way Sandra could afford to give me $500 a month." Moreover, my mother-in-law continued, "Sandra is the one managing my pension, isn't she? You might have told Robert otherwise, but I'm sure you're dipping into my pension." She puffed up her chest and glared at me. I glared back, refusing to back down. "It's true that I've succeeded as a business owner. You're lying. Stop spreading lies about my wife. You should divorce this lying wife already. You can live here with me, Kevin, and Carol. Besides, there's no proof that Sandra isn't earning money. Here it is." With that, I pulled out my paycheck and showed it to her. The sight of it left my mother-in-law, Kevin, and his wife stunned. Since Mom moved in, we haven't used any of her pension. If Mom ever wanted to leave, Sandra has been managing it so she could live independently. But instead, Mom, you've been bossing Sandra around, interfering with her work. You're the problem. If you don't like Sandra, you should leave right now." "I don't believe any of this," my mother-in-law retorted, refusing to listen to anything we said. Afterward, Robert and I sighed in disbelief, cutting her off. "Well, if that's how you feel, we'll pack our things and move to a new house. You guys will be stuck with a mortgage. But if that's okay with you, don't come crying to us for help. If you insist, mother-in-law will leave even with a pension. Maintaining your lifestyle will be challenging, but I guess that can't be helped, can it?" At our words, my mother-in-law turned beet red and yelled at us to leave. "Wait, you can't be serious. We don't have to do that, do we?" Kevin and his wife tried to intervene, but my mother-in-law gave us a fierce look and said, "Don't you dare talk back, Kevin. You're going to be a CEO, aren't you? I don't mind you using my pension, so just start a company and show us how successful you can become. I'll show you what happens when you defy us." Her words were filled with intensity. Hearing this, we decided it was best to no longer be involved with her or Kevin's family and left the house. Of course, the mortgage on the house remained, but we changed the ownership to Kevin's name. Some time had passed since then. While there was still some lingering dissatisfaction from that incident, being freed from my mother-in-law's sarcasm, we were able to return to our normal routine. While we were working from home like usual in our new apartment, my mother-in-law called my husband, Kevin, crying. She said Kevin took her pension money and disappeared a week ago. She and Carol, Kevin's sister, were left alone in the house and needed help. My mother-in-law was too upset to talk, so she passed the phone to Carol. Carol explained that since Kevin's failed business and selling the family home, their parents had cut ties with them. They hadn't been able to reach their parents since then. My husband sighed and said, "I knew it. He told them not to involve us because we had warned them before leaving. He said they could report Kevin missing to the police, but that we wouldn't help them." After hanging up, I was shocked by my husband's reaction, but he believed they deserved what happened, and I ended up agreeing with him. They kept calling my husband's phone numerous times. Whenever he reluctantly answered, Carol would cry about not knowing how to report Kevin missing. We were surprised she didn't know what to do and advised her to call the police. However, despite their efforts, they couldn't locate Kevin. Just when we thought Kevin might remain missing, we heard the news that he had been arrested for robbing a bank in another state. Apparently, he did it to pay off his debts. This wasn't his first time committing such a crime, and it seemed he was likely facing a significant jail sentence. Carol is stuck living with my mother-in-law in their old house because she can't go back to her parents' home. She's unsure if she'll divorce Kevin, but that's not her priority right now. She's working with a temp agency, struggling with her first job, but somehow managing to get by each day. My mother-in-law is in a tough spot too. Kevin took all her pension, and now she's left to repay his debts. She started working part-time to make ends meet. While my husband and I feel bad for them, we've decided not to help and cut off contact. They're experiencing the tough realities of life my mother-in-law often talked about. Despite the challenges since my mother-in-law moved in, my husband and I are relieved to have returned to our peaceful routine. "Okay, Mona, it's time for you to leave," my mother-in-law said loudly. She spoke so loudly that it sounded like the roar of the sea bears in the harbor. "We're going on a fancy cruise, just the four of us, right?" I asked. But my mother-in-law didn't seem happy. Her face twisted into an even meaner expression. "Did you really think someone like you, who can't even keep a house clean, could come with us on this cruise? How audacious of you. Take this money, Clark. A useless daughter-in-law like her doesn't need to have fun. You can't possibly enjoy a vacation at our level. You're too foolish to even understand that." I didn't argue back against her harsh words. In my everyday life, I was used to being treated poorly with no one to support me. I had already given up hope. My mother-in-law laughed rudely and boarded the ship in a cheerful mood for vacation. My father-in-law and husband didn't say anything either. I looked at the three of them quietly, and as the ship sailed away, I waved and shouted, "Goodbye. Best of luck to you." My mother-in-law started yelling back at me, but I ignored her. "You're about to go on a trip I've planned for you," she said. "Well, it's the best trip for me, at least. Enjoy the surprise revenge I have in store for you. You'll find out the details when you get there." My name is Mona, and I'm a 38-year-old homemaker. I work as a clerk at a medium-sized company. I've been married to Andrew for 7 years. Andrew and I were friends from our college days. We lost touch after graduating, but we started meeting up again by chance. Eventually, we fell in love and started dating about a year later. Shortly after Andrew and I started dating, he shared a secret with me. He told me he was unable to have children because of a condition called infertility. He looked sad when he told me, saying, "If we're together, we won't be able to have kids." But I wasn't upset by it. I never really had a strong desire to have children myself, and I believed we could still find happiness together even without them. So for the past 7 years of our marriage, without any children, we've been living peacefully as a couple. However, our relationship with my parents-in-law has always been difficult. Our house is right across from theirs, and since Andrew works for their company, we see them often. I don't mind that part. The issue is that both of my parents-in-law treat me coldly. My mother-in-law has always favored Andrew, so she doesn't seem to like me much and treats me like a bother. She often tries to pass household chores onto me, which is a common occurrence. She'll say things like, "Mona, I'm busy with work, so could you do the laundry and cleaning?" Or, "Oh, you don't have to cook. I can't eat the food you make anyway." When I explain that I also work full-time and it's hard for me to do everything, she gets angry. She'll say things like, "How dare you talk back to your mother-in-law? You're not fit to be my son's wife. Pack your bags and leave now." On top of that, my father-in-law is also set in his old-fashioned ways. He often says things like, "Mona, when are you going to stop working? "You're getting older, so you should have a child soon." Or he'll criticize my education, saying, "What kind of schooling did you even get?" In any case, times have changed. You can have a happy home without children. But that's not the real issue. If I hear more of that talk, I'll call your company tomorrow and demand you quit your job to have a child. Dealing with my in-laws is tough because they're so set in their traditional views. I try to respond politely, but they often respond with even more criticism, so sometimes I just ignore them. Andrew acts like he's unaware of their behavior. He's gentle and avoids conflict, but that's not always helpful. He worries about upsetting his parents, so he sometimes ignores their behavior or even agrees with them to keep the peace. I hate to admit it, but a big reason we haven't had children is because of Andrew's infertility. He asked me not to tell his parents, so I kept it to myself. But it hurts that he doesn't stand up for me when they criticize me. Despite all this, I still love Andrew. He's a good husband who even cooks dinner for me. When I come home late from work, it means we can go out and enjoy ourselves on weekends. Both of us love traveling and have explored many places during our 7 years of marriage. One day, my husband handed me a brochure. "Mona, wouldn't it be amazing to go on a luxury cruise ship? I've never been on one before, only on a ferry." That sounds like so much fun, but we don't have that kind of money right now. Well, let's plan for 2 years from now. We'll save up and work together until then. That sounds like a good idea. We should be able to save enough money in 2 years. Okay, let's do it. So we started focusing on saving money. We avoided unnecessary purchases and did our best to save every penny. Then, 6 months before the trip, my mother-in-law unexpectedly showed up at our house as usual. "Hey, I heard we're going on a luxury cruise. Have you booked it yet? If you don't hurry, you might miss out on reservations." I was surprised by her sudden question and asked her how she knew about our trip. Andrew, sitting across from me, sheepishly admitted, "Oh, I mentioned it to Mom. We'll be away for more than 10 days, so it seemed natural." I get that. But if they find out before we book, they might want to come with us. I wanted to keep it a secret from them. But my mother-in-law kept talking. "Work might be busy, but it's important to have fun sometimes, right?" I couldn't believe it when my mother-in-law grinned and said, "Of course we're going. My husband will come too." It was shocking. I had wanted to go on this trip with just my husband, not with my in-laws. I looked at Andrew, hoping he would object. I couldn't remember the last time we had a trip together as a family, but Andrew remained silent, and I felt helpless. After that, my in-laws kept visiting and talking about the trip. I thought of asking Andrew, who had suggested the idea, to make the reservations, but he always dodged the conversation, claiming to be busy with work. About a month before the trip, something happened. Andrew went out for a business dinner and didn't return until after midnight. Worried, I grabbed the car keys to go pick him up. Just then, the front door slammed open, and Andrew came in. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed," he said, taking off his jacket and heading straight to the bathroom. I stayed up late, feeling anxious, but he acted like nothing was wrong. Feeling lonely, I picked up his jacket, and something fell out of the pocket. I quickly grabbed it. It was a small gift box with a message card tucked under the ribbon. Without thinking, I read the card, and what I saw shocked me to my core. "Thank you always, Andrew. I love you." My heart sank. As questions swirled in my mind, I couldn't shake off the uncertainty. Who had Andrew been meeting with last night, and who had given him this gift? What did that message really mean? Unable to sleep, I spent the night tossing and turning in the living room. The next morning, Andrew woke up nonchalantly with a big yawn. I confronted him with the gift box and message card. "What's this? Where were you yesterday? It wasn't just a business meeting, was it?" Andrew's eyes widened in surprise. "No, it wasn't like that. It's just that, thanks for helping her with work." "I see. It's quite a passionate thank you saying, 'I love you,'" I remarked. Andrew began stammering and repeating himself, trying to explain. "No, it's not like that. It's just..." Feeling frustrated with the situation, I decided to leave and go to work. Despite feeling uneasy, I managed to focus and finish my tasks by lunchtime. When I checked my phone, I saw numerous missed calls from my in-laws. Feeling annoyed, I hesitantly answered when my mother-in-law called again. "Hey, Mona. I heard you suspect Andrew of cheating on you. Our child would never do such a thing, you know. Even if he did, That's just a man's instinct. Excuse me, my mother-in-law said forcefully before my father-in-law took the phone. That's right. If anything, it's your fault for doing something to make him cheat on you in the first place. Andrew only cheats because you don't have children and are always working. When you get home, make sure you apologize to my son. Got it? My father-in-law said, spewing accusations before abruptly hanging up the phone. I'd had enough. My in-laws were painting me as the villain, and my husband, who didn't defend me, even sided with them. After enduring it all for so long, I finally decided to put my plan into action. Then came the day of our departure for the luxurious cruise. My in-laws and Andrew happily got into the car, ready for the trip. I would drive separately to the port and join them there. Inside, I felt a thrill of excitement. It's going to be a fantastic trip, I said, holding back a laugh as I drove towards the port. But when we arrived, I was surprised to find the port quiet and deserted. I unloaded everyone's luggage and made my way towards the pier, breathing in the scent of the sea. Andrew seemed carefree and playful. Then, just as I was about to board, my mother-in-law approached me with a big smile on her face. Thanks for booking the trip, Mona. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Don't forget to pick us up. Confused, I asked, what do you mean? Aren't we all going on this trip together? My mother-in-law sneered and made a nasty face. Oh, a daughter-in-law is just a stranger to us. Don't you understand? As long as you pay up, we're fine. I stayed silent. Meanwhile, my father-in-law and husband were happily browsing through travel magazines. Andrew noticed my expression, shrugged, and shamelessly remarked, seems like it's true. By the way, I haven't seen any luxury cruise ship around. Where is it? My mother-in-law looked around suspiciously, noticing the lack of other passengers. Did you get the right location, Mona? Don't worry, just enjoy yourselves from here, I said as I watched them board the boat. Is this really the right ship? My father-in-law muttered, eyeing the small boat in front of him. It's just a smaller boat to transfer you to the luxury cruise ship. It's a safety precaution, I reassured them. Don't worry, get on board quickly. I urged them onto the small boat with their luggage. Take care, I called to the boatman as they set off. Goodbye. Best of luck to you. With a big smile, I waved goodbye to them. I thought I heard my mother-in-law shouting something, but I ignored it. Once they disappeared from view, I gathered my things and headed back to the car, hoping for a fun trip ahead. Later, when I returned home, I gathered all the belongings I had before getting married, clothes, appliances, and furniture, and placed them in one spot. Just as I finished, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. How dare you trick us? There's no luxury cruise ship. Where are we? She shouted. Her frantic tone amused me, and I couldn't help but laugh. After a moment, I decided to respond to her question. There never was a luxury cruise ship. I knew you'd try to leave me behind, so I didn't book anything. Do you really think you could get away with this? Where are we? I could call the police, my father-in-law's voice chimed in. The police? That's a bit much. Don't you think? I simply brought you to your wife's hometown. Did you get a chance to see Aunt Mel? I replied. Once again, my mother-in-law shouted. What are you talking about? Aunt Mel, your older sister Mel. I spoke to her, and she suggested bringing you all there. She'll likely take good care of you, I clarified. Aunt Mel, who was like a mother figure to my mother-in-law, had a strong stance against dishonesty. Despite only meeting her a few times at family gatherings, we had always gotten along well. So, I decided to open up to her and share everything I had been going through with my in-laws and husband. As I had expected, Aunt Mel was furious but immediately offered her support. I'll come pick you guys up soon, she said, ending the call. Shortly afterward, I moved to a new apartment closer to my workplace, which made my daily commute much easier. During the move, I collected evidence of my husband's infidelity. He had been careless, leaving behind plenty of proof. By the time I had settled into my new place, I had gathered enough evidence to support my divorce case. With the help of a lawyer, we successfully finalized the divorce. I also sought compensation for the emotional damage caused by the affair. The lawyer who met with my ex-husband, Andrew, reported that he looked devastated and exhausted. Meanwhile, Aunt Mel, a well-known sports instructor in the local community, had been keeping my in-laws and Andrew extremely busy from morning till night. They were now living a life as demanding as the one they had imposed on me. Aunt Mel mentioned that if they genuinely repented, they could be released from their duties. However, My in-laws' family business had practically gone bankrupt, and they had nowhere else to turn. But their struggles were no longer my concern. I simply hoped to never have to see them again. On a brighter note, I've recently met a kind and understanding man who accepts me, including my divorce and all that led up to it. Once his work becomes less hectic, we plan to get married. Although my journey to happiness has been challenging, I'm looking forward to a joyful life with someone